I want you to understand something. From the very beginning of this moment, we are sharing together. The greatest territory you will ever conquer is not a country, not a company, not even a career. It is your own mind. Because whether you rise or fall, whether you live in peace or in torment, whether you build or you destroy, all of it begins within that invisible space between your ears. You see, most people are trying to fix their lives by rearranging their circumstances. They change jobs, they change relationships, they change environments, but they never change their thinking. And so they carry the same chaos into a different location. They relocate the problem without resolving it. That is why you can have someone living in luxury and still be restless, and another person with very little, yet walking in deep, unshakable peace. Peace is not the product of your environment. Peace is the result of mental mastery. Now hear this carefully. Your mind was not designed to control you. You were designed to govern it. But somewhere along the way, many people surrendered authority over their thoughts. They became tenants in a house they were supposed to own. And when you do not rule your mind will rule you. It will replay fear. It will magnify doubt. It will rehearse failure. It will trap you in cycles of anxiety and confusion. And the tragedy is this: you will think it is normal. It is not normal to live in constant worry. It is not normal to be a prisoner of fear. It is not normal to wake up with no clarity, no direction, no control over your inner world. That is not life as it was meant to be lived. That is a mind left unattended. Let me tell you something powerful. Whatever you consistently think about, you will eventually become. Your thoughts are not passive. They are creative. They are formative. They are builders of your reality. If you think limitation, you will live limitation. If you think fear, you will act in fear. If you think peace, you will produce peace. So the question is not what is happening around you. The real question is, what is happening within you? Because your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And many people have never been trained to think. They have been trained to react. They have been conditioned by circumstances, by upbringing, by opinions, by experiences. But they have never learned the discipline of choosing their thoughts intentionally. You cannot master your life until you master your thinking. Let me say that again so it settles deep in your spirit. You cannot master your life until you master your thinking. Now, mastering your mind does not mean you will never face negative thoughts. That is unrealistic. Thoughts will come. Situations will arise. Challenges will press against you. But mastery means you decide which thoughts are allowed to stay. You must become selective. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every idea deserves your agreement. Not every voice deserves your belief. Some thoughts must be rejected immediately. If a thought weakens you, question it. If a thought creates fear, challenge it. If a thought robs you of peace, evict it. Because your mind is not a dumping ground. It is a garden. And whatever you allow to be planted there will grow. If you plant worry, you will harvest anxiety. If you plant doubt, you will harvest hesitation. But if you plant clarity, if you plant truth, if you plant discipline, you will harvest strength and peace. Peace is not something you find accidentally. It is something you cultivate intentionally. And cultivation requires discipline. Let me be very honest with you. Your mind will resist discipline at first. It will prefer comfort. It will prefer familiar patterns, even if those patterns are destructive. That is why people stay stuck. Not because they lack opportunity, but because they lack mental control. But the moment you decide, truly decide, that you will no longer be controlled by your thoughts, that is the moment your life begins to change. You must learn to pause. When pressure comes, pause. When emotions rise, pause. When fear speaks, pause. Because in that pause lies your power. Most people react instantly. They allow emotions to dictate decisions. They allow temporary feelings to produce permanent consequences. But when you master your mind, you create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you choose wisely. That is where peace lives. Peace is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of control. It is the ability to remain steady while everything around you is unstable. It is the ability to think clearly while others panic. It is the ability to stand firm while others collapse under pressure. And that kind of peace is not given, it is developed. You develop it by feeding your mind the right things. What you listen to matters. What you watch matters. What you entertain in your thoughts matters. Because your mind absorbs everything you expose it to. If you constantly feed your mind negativity, fear, confusion, and chaos, do not expect peace to grow there. That would be like planting weeds and expecting flowers. You must become intentional about your mental diet. Guard your mind. Protect it. Train it. Because whatever controls your mind controls your life. And let me tell you something else. Your mind believes what you repeat. If you constantly tell yourself you are not enough, your mind will accept it as truth. If you constantly rehearse failure, your mind will prepare for it. But if you begin to speak strength, clarity, purpose, and peace, your mind will begin to align with that reality. You must speak to yourself deliberately. Do not wait for the world to affirm you. Do not depend on others to define you. You have the authority to establish the atmosphere of your own mind. And once you take that authority seriously, everything begins to shift. You start to see differently. You start to respond differently. You start to live differently. Because you are no longer at the mercy of your thoughts. You are directing them. And here is the beautiful part. When you master your mind, you don't just find peace. You become a source of peace. People will not understand it. They will look at your life and wonder how you remain calm under pressure, how you remain focused in chaos, how you remain grounded when everything seems uncertain. And the answer will be simple. You are not controlled by what is happening around you, because you have mastered what is happening within you. That is true power, not dominance over others, but dominion over yourself. Not control of circumstances, but control of your response. That is the highest level of leadership, self-leadership. Because if you cannot lead your own mind, you cannot lead anything else effectively. So today, I challenge you. Stop negotiating with destructive thoughts. Stop tolerating mental habits that weaken you. Stop allowing your mind to wander without direction. Take responsibility, take authority, take control. Begin to train your mind daily. Be intentional about what you think, what you focus on, what you believe. Build the discipline to redirect your thoughts when they drift into negativity. And understand this is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. Every day you must choose clarity over confusion. Every day you must choose peace over worry. Every day you must choose discipline over impulse. And as you do, something powerful begins to happen. Your mind becomes stronger. Your thinking becomes sharper. Your emotions become steadier. And your life becomes more aligned. Because a disciplined mind produces a disciplined life. And a disciplined life produces peace. So do not wait for peace to come from outside. It will not. It cannot. Peace is an inside job. Master your mind. And when you do, you will discover something extraordinary, that the peace you were searching for was never out there. It was always within your reach, waiting for you to take control. And once you do, nothing will be able to take it from you. Self-awareness is the first doorway to gaining authority over your thoughts. And many people want control without awareness. They want peace without understanding what disturbs them. They want clarity without ever examining the confusion they carry inside. But you cannot change what you are not aware of. You cannot govern what you refuse to observe. Awareness is where authority begins. You see, most individuals move through life on autopilot. They think, but they don't examine their thinking. They feel, but they don't question their emotions. They react, but they don't investigate the source of those reactions. And so their lives become a cycle of repeated patterns. Patterns they do not understand, yet continue to reinforce. Self-awareness interrupts that cycle. It forces you to look inward, not casually, but honestly. It demands that you ask yourself difficult questions. Why do I think this way? Why does this situation trigger me? Why do I respond with fear instead of confidence? Why do I doubt when there is no evidence of failure? These questions are not comfortable, but they are necessary. Because until you become aware of your internal patterns, you will keep living out unconscious habits. And unconscious habits will always overpower good intentions. There are people who sincerely want to grow, sincerely want to change, sincerely want to find peace, but their lack of awareness keeps them bound. They try to fix the surface without addressing the root. They manage behavior without understanding belief. And as long as the belief remains untouched, the behavior will always return. Self-awareness exposes the root. It reveals the hidden agreements you have made with yourself. It shows you the narratives you have accepted as truth without ever questioning them. It uncovers the silent assumptions that shape your decisions every single day. And some of those assumptions are limiting. Some of them were formed in moments of pain, in moments of failure, in moments of rejection. And instead of processing those moments correctly, the mind created conclusions like, I am not enough. I always fail. I cannot trust. I am not capable. And over time, those conclusions became internal laws. But here is the danger. Your mind does not distinguish between truth and repetition. It simply accepts what is reinforced consistently. So if you have been repeating a false belief long enough, your mind will treat it as reality. That is why awareness is so powerful, because awareness allows you to catch the lie in motion. It allows you to observe a thought and say, wait a moment, this is not necessarily true. And in that moment, you begin to break the authority that thought had over you. Without awareness, you believe everything you think. With awareness, you begin to question everything you think. And that questioning is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the beginning of mental freedom. Because once you realize that not every thought deserves your agreement, you begin to step into authority. You begin to understand that you are not your thoughts, you are the observer of your thoughts. And that distinction changes everything. If you are your thoughts, then you are trapped. But if you are the observer, then you have power. Power to accept or reject. Power to redirect. Power to reframe. Power to choose. And choice is where authority lies. But awareness is what reveals that choice. Without awareness, you react automatically. Someone says something, and you immediately feel offended. A situation changes, and you immediately feel anxious. A challenge appears, and you immediately feel overwhelmed. There is no pause, no examination, no control, just reaction. But when awareness is present, something shifts. You begin to notice the reaction as it forms. You begin to sense the emotion before it fully takes over. You begin to recognize the thought pattern before it becomes dominant. And in that recognition, you gain a window, a brief but powerful window where you can intervene. That is where transformation begins. Not after the reaction, not after the damage is done, but in that moment of awareness, before the thought takes control. And the more aware you become, the earlier you catch those patterns. At first, you may only notice your thoughts after they have already affected your emotions. Then, with practice, you begin to notice them as they are forming. Eventually, you can detect them at the very entrance of your mind. And when you reach that level of awareness, you are no longer easily controlled by external circumstances, because you are no longer allowing unchecked thoughts to dictate your internal state. Now understand this. Self-awareness is not about overthinking. It is not about analyzing every detail to the point of paralysis. It is about clarity. It is about being conscious of what is happening within you without becoming overwhelmed by it. There is a difference between awareness and obsession. Awareness observes. Obsession overanalyzes. Awareness gives you control. Obsession drains your energy. So the goal is not to get lost in your thoughts, but to become familiar with them, to recognize their patterns, to understand their triggers, to identify their origins. Because once you understand the pattern, you can interrupt it. And interruption is the beginning of change. You cannot eliminate what you cannot identify. You cannot correct what you cannot see. You cannot master what you do not understand. So awareness becomes your foundation. It is the lens through which you begin to see yourself clearly, not the version of yourself you present to the world, but the version that exists within your private thoughts, and that requires honesty. Real self-awareness demands that you stop pretending. It requires that you stop justifying destructive patterns. It requires that you stop blaming external factors for internal conditions. Because as long as you blame, you remain powerless. But the moment you take responsibility, you gain authority. Responsibility is not about guilt. It is about ownership. It is about saying, this is what is happening inside me, and I have the power to address it. And that statement alone shifts your position. From victim to leader, you become the leader of your own mind. And leadership begins with awareness. Think about any great leader. They are aware. They understand the environment. They understand the people. They understand the dynamics at play. But more importantly, they understand themselves. Because if you do not understand yourself, you will misinterpret everything else. You will project your fears onto situations. You will assume intentions that are not there. You will create problems that do not exist. All because your internal world is unclear. But when you are self-aware, you see things as they are, not as your fears distort them to be. And that clarity produces peace. Not because life becomes easier, but because your perception becomes accurate. And perception shapes experience. Two people can go through the same situation and come out with completely different outcomes. Not because the situation was different, but because their internal awareness was different. One reacts unconsciously, driven by fear and assumption. The other responds consciously, guided by clarity and understanding. And that difference begins with awareness. So you must train yourself to become aware, not occasionally, but consistently. Pay attention to your thoughts. Notice your emotional patterns. Observe your reactions. And do not judge yourself in the process. Judgment blocks awareness. Because when you judge yourself, you become defensive. You try to hide from what you see instead of learning from it. But awareness requires openness. It requires that you look at yourself without distortion, without exaggeration, without denial, just truth. And truth is what sets you free. Not comfortable truth, but accurate truth. Because accurate awareness gives you the right target for change. If you misidentify the problem, you will apply the wrong solution. But when you are aware, you deal with the real issue, not the surface symptom. And that is what creates lasting transformation. So as you move forward, begin to slow down internally, not in your actions, but in your awareness. Be present with your thoughts. Be conscious of your internal dialogue. Listen to what your mind is saying when no one else is around. Because that is where your true beliefs live. And those beliefs are shaping your life, whether you realize it or not. Once you become aware of them, you can begin to challenge them. Once you challenge them, you can begin to change them. And once you change them, you begin to experience a different reality. Because your outer world will always align with your inner world. And your inner world is governed by your thoughts. So self-awareness is not optional, it is essential. It is the doorway. It is the entry point. It is the moment where unconscious living ends and intentional living begins. And once you step through that doorway, you will never see yourself the same way again. You will begin to recognize patterns that once controlled you. You will begin to see triggers that once confused you. You will begin to understand responses that once felt automatic. And in that understanding, you will discover something powerful. You have more control than you thought. Not control over everything, but control over the most important thing, your mind. And once you truly see that, once you become fully aware of the inner workings of your thoughts, you can no longer remain passive, because awareness brings responsibility. And responsibility activates authority. And authority gives you the ability to shape your inner world with intention, clarity, and purpose.